Welcome to the podcast today. Today I'm joined by someone whose role sits in a really fascinating intersection of law, technology, innovation, the head of legal for product at Tide. Would you be so kind just to introduce yourself and give us sort of synopsis on your background?
Yeah, thank you. I'm James Clancy. As you said, I'm head of legal for product at Tide. Tide is a business financial platform. We provide various products to SMEs, anything from invoicing, accounting, loans, cars, point of sale devices. I'm relatively new there. Been there for about 4 months now. Before that, I was at another startup for a couple of years, and before that, spent a long time working at NatWest.
I know quite a lot about Tide being a personal customer as well. So, but yeah, a really good organization. And if anyone's thinking about starting a business, I would definitely recommend looking at Tide to do your banking or your bank accounts or even your accounting and invoicing because it's been when I started J Group several years ago now, it was a really good sort of platform to embed myself in and really understand how I could do the invoicing, and everything's done in the app as well. So it's a really useful organization. I think what
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, the first question what I wanted to ask was what originally inspired you to pursue a legal career?
Yeah, to be honest, I was coming out of uni. I thought about law before, but I'd also thought about other things. So coming out of uni or towards the end of uni, I started applying for different jobs, different sectors, and one of those was law. I ended up on a VAC scheme at Berwyn Leighton Paisner,
Mm.
enjoyed it, and off the back of that, got offered a training contract, and an allowance to do the GDL, LPC, etc. So went with it. It was great. I've made a lot of friends through it. I've actually met my wife through working in law.
Okay.
I went and worked abroad with BLP, but I also thought that private practice wasn't for me relatively early on.
Mhm.
So made the switch to in-house on qualification, and haven't looked back really since then.
Okay. And what team did you qualify into in private practice?
So I didn't.
Okay.
A senior associate from the finance team had moved in-house about 6 months before I was due to qualify, and she needed a junior lawyer.
Okay.
As I was going through all the kind of qualification interviews and process, I was also going through interview process with her and secured that, and then told BLP that actually I'd be leaving, which was a shame because, like I said, nice people, good place to
Mhm.
work. But I think I just knew it wasn't for me, private practice. I wanted to be close to the business. And particularly the more junior level, I felt that I wasn't able to have the impact that I wanted to have from a career in law. At the senior level, yes, at private practice, but
Mhm.
I guess I was a bit impatient, maybe a bit naive, but impatient really. And I wanted to get on with that more commercial side of law that you get from working in-house earlier on.
And for anyone who maybe is in law school at the moment and doesn't have that sort of knowledge of the in-house market, what sort of knowledge did you have when you were making that sort of first step? Were you quite informed or um
So this was 12 years ago, I think. And back then it was quite unusual to go in-house at zero PQE,
mm,
basically. So there wasn't that many options, and all the information out there was more for senior lawyers. So I pretty much just called the senior associate who I'd worked with and moved. And I was like, well, what will I actually be doing? What will I be doing as a junior lawyer? It was a Norwegian shipping company. And she just taught me through it. And it was very much like what a junior lawyer would be doing in private practice,
mm,
but doing it alongside your commercial colleagues and being in the room when decisions were made and influencing those decisions rather than what I found in private practice was the decision was made before it came to you and you were implementing it.
mhm. And when you sort of went through that journey of your first sort of days in house, um, I assume that you didn't do a secondment in your training contract. You it was
I did actually near the end
okay.
of it. Yeah, I did. The last couple of months actually of my training contract, I was sent out on a comment, probably that no one else wanted because they knew I was leaving.
So you had some sort of experience of the in-house market in essence before you sort of made that jump.
Yeah, I did, but I'd say in-house roles vary greatly from place to place, from sector to sector. And the my first in-house role that wasn't a comment at this, it was called Seadrill. Felt it was a public company, but it felt like a small business.
Mm,
We weren't in the legal team, we were in the finance team, so
right.
you were very exposed in a good way, and it was very fast paced, transactional nature of work. So it was a shock how you were exposed. Someone would ask you a decision, they'd be sat right next,
Mm,
ask you a question, you'd be expected to give them a decision. You sat right next to them. You didn't have that, but you could sit back, think. So
mm.
very quick. But I've had other roles that haven't been as fast paced, and you have a bit more time, and the expectation of legal is different. So it really varies, I find. Now I'm in the startup world, it's back to very fast paced again.
Mm. And how did you go from working in Seadrill, which is an oil and gas sort of exploration company, isn't it, to moving into sort of FS? Because that's a harder sort of jump if you don't have that experience to move in into a sort of regulated space.
Yeah, so my role at Seadrill was finance transactions.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, in-house you do everything anyway, but the core of the role was finance transactions. Um, and as much as I enjoyed it, they ended up filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the US while I was there, and I could have stayed, but I would have just been doing restructuring for a couple of years, and I didn't want that. I wanted a bit of a variety.
Mhm.
So I just started looking at the market, what opportunities came up, and there was a kind of fintech funder, basically, called
Mhm.
BCI Capital, part of the Blanche Alcott Group, who wanted a lawyer. And it was just a good fit. It was transactional, finance transactions. So that's how I kind of got into that side of things. I then ended up at NatWest and
Mm.
just, so many opportunities in NatWest to move around and do different things, and ended up more on the SME funding side of things, particularly asset finance, and started to build knowledge. I was never trained in the kind of more SME regulation, financial services world, but you just build up knowledge as you go. And I was there for 6 years. And it was a great place to learn because it was that big structured environment.
Mm.
So kind of ended up there more out of ways of working rather than taking an active decision.
What would you say the biggest differences are working in NatWest, massive organization, then to moving into a sort of fintech, smaller organization? What are the sort of main differences you might see in the sort of legal team and the business overall?
Yeah, so pace and risk appetite. So um, for the correct reasons, places like NatWest operate at a slower pace.
Okay.
There's more committees to make decisions. They have far more regulatory focus. The impact they have if a decision is wrong on the economy is far, far greater than a smaller business or a startup. So things are slower. It takes longer to decide what to do. Have to
Mhm.
go through more risk approval to do something. Then obviously you do at a startup where you make a decision, you tend to implement it within a couple of days. And then caution as well. So you don't have the ability at NatWest to make mistakes.
Mm.
In a smaller startup environment, the attitude is different, and it's, well, let's get something out and we can iterate as we go, which is a different challenge for a lawyer. It's enjoyable, but you are kind of, again, exposed
Mm.
to making quick decisions and accepting that things aren't going to be perfect, but you deal with that as
Mm.
and when you have to.
And with regards to, the role, what does sort of average day-to-day of your role look like?
Completely varied and broad. So, you mentioned earlier that you use Tide, and the whole thing about it is meant to be one place for an SME business owner to
Mhm.
go and do all their management, business management, financial services. So that means we have a really broad product range. The
Mhm.
last startup I was at, we had one product. Now I couldn't even tell you how many, like dozens. And my team, we look after all those products from a legal perspective. So I'll be kind of pulled from one thing to another. Something's happening over there that needs jumping on, but you've got a planned bit of work, a planned project that you're trying to focus on. So
Mhm.
very broad, but if I could say generally what our scope is, it's building, developing, and maintaining the product base. And that means anything in a customer journey for a product, a loan, for example, we work on alongside product managers. So marketing of that product, structuring of the product, terms and conditions for the product, what happens in life of a product, what happens at the end of a product, and
Mm.
litigation of that product. That's what my team will cover across all Tides and product range.
And how do you manage that sort of, I guess, stereotypical phrase of not being a blocker to the sort of technology teams, etc.? How do you sort of, you know, I guess, show yourself to the business to be, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? A partner rather than a blocker.
Yeah, so I think early engagement, and that's two ways. That's relying on our product colleagues or commercial colleagues to bring us into things early, but separately, putting the onus on us as a team, each individually, to know your stakeholders, be meeting with them regularly, so you know what they're working on, and you can get in on a project from day one and influence. Product lawyers should not be a tick box at the end of a project. If we're hearing about something before it's launched, something's gone wrong, we need to be involved from day one and helping structuring things. So you're not a blocker, you're just part of the project,
Mhm.
and you're influencing a product or a process to make sure it's compliant, but also the best thing for Tide and the customer early on. So you don't become a roadblock later.
Absolutely. And what would you say is the sort of biggest challenges facing sort of fintech businesses at the moment?
I mean, there's constant regulatory change that
Mhm.
you need to stay on top of. And competition, right? And pace of change, fundraising. Fintech is a huge industry in the UK. Everyone's trying to have a crack at something. So it's
Mhm.
staying on top of your products, beating the competition, making sure you stay agile, whilst also, because it is the fin in tech, a regulated area, making
Mhm.
sure you do it safely, you adapt to changing regulation, so that there's no problems further down the line when you are releasing these competitive products.
Mhm. And with regards to sort of fast evolving areas such as AI as
Mhm.
well, how do you deal with the sort of legal aspects of that, and where do you see sort of legal AI going in the sort of future?
Yeah, so I have to admit, I'm at a beginner level of
Mm.
AI. Moving to Tide has pushed me to start using it. The
Mhm.
team before I got here use it on a daily basis. The kind of free resource stuff, right? We don't
Mhm.
have a subscription to anything. We just use the free stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm learning from the team members how to use it properly to the extent now that I probably use it on a daily basis. We use
Mhm.
it as a tool, like to speed things up, whether that's getting a first draft of some terms and conditions out, and that then you can adapt, whether it's doing a bit of research. Um, I mean, what I was using it for yesterday was kind of going back and forth. I'm negotiating a certain transaction, going back and forth on some wording that I wanted to offer to the
Mhm.
other side, almost like a little lawyer that's helping me work something out. Um, I have to say, I still think it's at the stage where it needs you to, in inverted commas, babysit it. I've had instances where it just makes up stuff.
Mhm.
It made up some consumer credit regulation, and thankfully I knew quite a lot about that piece of regulation. So I thought, well,
Mhm.
where's that come from? But as a tool, 100% it speeds things up.
Yeah, I think having this conversation with several sort of head of legal general counsels over the last sort of few months has been a really sort of insightful aspect to doing this podcast. Some of the sort of feedback that I was getting was some of the sort of general counsels and heads of legal sat down with these sort of providers and undertook their demos. And one of the things is the speed that it's progressing at the moment is so much per month. When you do buy something, it's already outdated by the time you've launched it in the business. And what the sort of advice that I've been getting from a lot of sort of general counsels has been is wait a year or two, see what's happening, and allow it to really sort of, I guess, like electric cars, right? Electric cars, the infrastructure really isn't there still, but in the next sort of 5, 10 years, it might be. where it makes more sense to buy an electric car. And it's the
Yeah.
same with what sort of AI. I mean, I use it on a day-to-day basis, just kind of like what you said with regards to maybe wording something a little bit better than I could. But it's really influential if you want some stats real quick.
Yeah.
Nothing that's going to be published or anything like that, but just something if you want a bit of background or something, you can ask it. And it really gives you a concise summary rather than going to Google and then trying to piece it all together.
Exactly.
Mm,
It's replaced my use of Google. And
mm,
as an in-house lawyer, often you don't have subscriptions to legal knowledge bases, so you do a
mm,
bit of Google law. That's kind of changing now for me to do ChatGPT law, but you still
mm,
need to check your sources on it in case it does hallucinate and send you down the wrong path.
mm,
Um, but yeah, no, definitely, I'm using it more and more by the day, and it's speeding up the work we do. And sometimes, again, working the house, what you're doing doesn't have to be perfect, and the use of ChatGPT or another AI tool gets you to that good enough stage quicker.
mm. And I was going to touch back just on an earlier point that we made with regards to sort of the sort of main differences of working in-house and in private practice. So myself, I personally worked in-house before, and during that sort of experience, what I really gained was the sort of the speed with the stakeholders. They don't want the sort of black letter law. They want, sort of concise path to yes, rather than you saying, no, we can't do this. They want a real sort of concise path. How can we do it legally? How do you go about that sort of on a day-to-day basis, giving your sort of, I guess, influence and strategic input to sort of get stakeholders to sort of buy in and get them to that sort of yes stage?
Yeah, so firstly, what we do as a team is try and anticipate the challenge we'll get on something. If we need to give some
Mhm.
if we're giving some advice as part of a process or a new product or whatever, and we can anticipate that there'll be some challenge because it might create, I don't know, an extra step in the customer journey or a bit of extra language that we don't particularly want here, whatever. If we expect a bit of pushback, we will first really challenge ourselves to what's the kind of bare minimum, say, legally safe bit that we can get comfortable with. For Tide. And then that's our starting position. So we anticipate any pushback. So you show that you've done to your stakeholders, you show that you've done that working already. So they know that you've pushed yourself as far as you can go. And then it's a case of, look, ultimately, this is what legal think we should do. This is the advice. We'll help you implement it. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. That's a business risk decision, and we can help you frame what the risk is, what mitigants we can put in place, and how you can accept that risk if there is any. It's never kind of you must do this. It's here's what we think you should do. Here's probably the simplest way you can do it. If you don't do it, here's the risks, and we can help you mitigate those if that's a decision, a path you want to go down.
And with regards to a product for banking, what's the sort of life cycle of a product, to from I guess initial idea to actual being embedded in the already products that you've got. So in the app, for example, is it a year, 2 years? I know every sort of product is going to be different, but get a sort of idea of that sort of time frame.
Yeah, it varies. Before joining here, I would have said a year. I think if I said a year now, I'll probably get the sack. That it's so. How long is a piece of string? Who are the partners you need? That often influences it. If you need like a third party partner to be the kind of the back end system for if it's a bank account or if it's payment rails, whatever, getting that supplier or partnership agreement in place can take time. But in parallel, you'll be building all the engineering stuff behind it, which
Mhm.
will be involved in somewhat, but more the kind of the actual journey, the customer journey. That's where we come in. T's and C's we can do pretty quickly as long as the business knows what they want the product to actually do. But I mean, weeks to a couple of months,
So that
probably.
that, that's
It's
a lot
it's
quicker than I imagined personally. So
it's a lot quicker than I imagined before coming here as well. But there's definitely a kind of execute at pace mentality at Tide. Now, some things will take longer, naturally, particularly for more regulated products, and particularly if you need some form of license, FCA license or whatever, then you're not going to get it done in months. It'll be longer. But smaller things, yeah, weeks to a couple of months max, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely surprising. I would have assumed that it would have taken a few years, but I guess that's the space that you're in is such a fast sort of developing space, that,
Mm,
I guess, speed is rewarded, with market share,
definitely.
etc.
And it doesn't need to be perfect. That's the other thing. You can get something out, test it, and iterate, and relaunch your T's and C's, or change the features of the product to meet whatever the customer need actually is. It's the getting the thing out is the important thing.
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on leadership. So, I mean, when you were at law school and when I was at law school as well, nobody teaches you how to be a leader in a legal team. I guess what I wanted to ask was more around your sort of leadership style, how that's developed, any sort of mentors that you may have had in your career as well that sort of shaped that as well.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, leadership in a line management, team
Mm,
management form has only been relatively recent for the last couple of years, really. And before that, when I was at NatWest, I was one of the senior lawyers, but I didn't have line management. I, of course, worked for more junior lawyers, but formal line management and leadership is something that's come in the last couple of years. So I'm still learning, really. I had a great boss at NatWest called Helena Thernstrom, who was a brilliant manager, and I learned a lot from her. And I think the way I manage and lead in my last role at Move and here at Tide adapts or changes depending on who the person is. Um, some cultures and also some personality types want more hands-on leadership, more involvement, and some prefer to be left alone with regular check-ins. So generally adapt. Try not to micromanage.
mm,
Sometimes being a lawyer, you want perfection, but actively try not to. More just set the direction of travel, set the goal, and then be there for the team member as much as they need or as much as they don't want, um, and adapt accordingly.
I think that's a really strong point that you make on the sort of personality of the person. From my experience as well, you really have to take on a person to person basis. Some people react very differently to how you manage them. And that's definitely my experience as well. I'm a person that personally doesn't really like to be micromanaged. I feel that I'm quite self-sufficient in what I'm doing. And if you feel that someone's maybe too hands-on when you
Yeah.
already kind of know what you're doing, it can be more harmful than good. Whilst there's other people out there that really sort of really like that sort of sounding board, to have someone that they can really sort of bounce their ideas off and have that sort of face-to-face interaction on a regular basis.
And it also depends on the level of seniority, right? So more junior lawyers, you want to be talking to them every single day, supporting them on whatever matter they're working on. More senior lawyers, definitely less so. And also the big learning thing for me in the last few years has been culture and culture
Mm.
differences. So Move, my last place was very international, had teams across Africa, India, we were going into the States, so very different cultural types. Tide as well is very international. So in my team alone, we've got people in Sofia in Bulgaria, Berlin, UK. We've got like US citizens. So really international kind of employee base. And how they want to be managed changes, but also how you communicate changes.
Mm.
Certain cultures require more explicit communication, different cultures, more implicit communication. So trying to get that balance right is a huge learning curve for me and also a challenge.
Mm. And that leads me on nicely onto my sort of next question. What's sort of one mistake that you've made as a leader and you've learned from?
I found hiring difficult. I thought I was a good reader of people,
Mm.
but probably in two instances in the last couple of years, I've got a hire wrong, for different reasons. One made the wrong hire, and the other thought I thought someone was the wrong hire, but actually ended up being the right hire. So that's difficult. And now I just have to check myself when I'm hiring, and also get input from others. whose opinions I value, what they think of a certain employed, not employee, or someone's going through an interview process. So I guess being more, what I've learned is be more aware of my uh, failures in hiring
Yeah.
to make sure I try and get it right.
Think it's such a difficult process because you've got to gauge someone and how they fit in your team, their skill set, etc., all in the space of a very limited amount of time where everyone's trying to put the best foot forward, and
Yeah.
it makes it a very challenging aspect. And I always recommend clients that we work with is if you're not sure about a candidate, let's say you've seen their CV, but they sit on that sort of, 50-50, you're not sure, should you interview them, should you not? I always recommend have a phone call with them, 15-minute phone call, get an idea of the type of person they are, and then you can move them forward if you think that it's a good fit. Because from my experience, and I've spoken to many lawyers in a sort of day-to-day basis, one CV might look not fantastic on paper, but when you actually
Mm,
speak to the candidate, you're like, wow, that person is really good, but their CV doesn't really reflect that. Um,
yeah.
and and I often give feedback to candidates about that is making sure that your CV is at the same sort of level as you as a person, because the CV is the sort of gate to open before you get the interview. And if your CV is not up to a really high sort of level, just you might not just get that sort of I guess
Foot in the door kind of
opportunity.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to talk about with regards to you know, when you are sort of mentoring sort of junior lawyers, what do you think is really important for them so they can progress their careers into maybe a sort of head of legal general counsel going forward? What sort of information would you give to maybe a younger self as well with regards to that, and how you should maybe structure your career to move forward in that sort of manner?
Yeah. I've so a lot of lawyers specialize early, right? I've intentionally tried not to do that. I've tried to
Mm-hmm.
keep my experience broad. Now that has its drawbacks,
Mm-hmm.
but I would encourage any junior lawyer to at least start like that. Particularly if you're in house. Don't be too picky about your first role and what it's
Mm-hmm.
doing. I think accept you're doing something new or a broad role and you'll learn a lot and you'll also probably find areas of business or law that you enjoy that you didn't even know existed.
Mm-hmm.
So try and get broad range of experience. Um, and then put yourself out there, like put your hand up for the difficult projects. Um, Go and speak to senior people if you can and ask if you can shadow them on certain things. Just get as much experience as you can. But really showing up for those difficult projects is a big thing, I think. If you can prove yourself there, you'll
Mm-hmm.
start to get more and more responsibility and you'll learn a hell of a lot as well. And more the responsibility comes, I think the more confident you become and it becomes a kind of, snowball effect.
Absolutely. That's really good advice. And I guess on yourself, what sort of motivates you on a sort of day-to-day basis?
I like variety. As I mentioned earlier, the kind of specialism thing. I like doing things I haven't, like pieces of work I've not done before, products I haven't worked on before, and the
Mm,
challenge that brings, kind of getting it's quite scary, but then trying to get your head around something and feeling like you've learned something and you've achieved something when you've started from scratch. I would say that probably motivates me. I do really like working with junior lawyers and seeing them develop and going off on their own career path. I definitely get satisfaction from that and working with people.
mhm. I think that's really good advice as well. And I think one of the sort of key aspects for myself as well is when you do have a manager, is that person that really sort of entrusts you to sort of take responsibility on, because when someone believes in you, you're more likely to give much more in that role. And I think that's anyone that might watch this podcast, any advice I would give them from a management point of view is entrust your employees, because they will really reward you in their sort of loyalty long term if they feel they're trusted. They feel that they're getting responsibility early on, and they're really sort of a vital part of the organization as well. I really think that those sort of three aspects are really important for keeping and retaining people long term.
Yeah, definitely. I think generally people thrive if they've got ownership of something. If
Mm,
they own it, they control it, they're on the hook for it, they've got responsibility for it, that's when people tend to thrive. So I think as a manager, you've got to find and identify bits of work or areas of the business for your team member to own. And that's what we do at Tide. So each lawyer owns their own product set, basically. Um, and then it feels like your own thing, your own business, and
Mm.
you're the kind of top lawyer on that thing. So you build up responsibility and ownership, and I think that's the key for me for managing a team and making sure everyone feels important and that they own something.
Absolutely. And with regards to how the role changes as you get more senior in-house. So obviously when you start off, NQ, sort of junior lawyer, you may be more embedded in the contracts. And how would you say that role changes and develops as you become more senior in your career up to head of legal general counsel level?
So I think you start building trust, and you start the line between legal and commercial advice starts to get blurred. And
Mm,
when your stakeholders trust you, you kind of go beyond just the legal bit, and that also allows you to influence more and influence direction of projects or work streams earlier on. So you get brought in earlier, more of a commercial stakeholder than just a lawyer. But that's something that going back to saying I was impatient, I
mm,
wanted that straight away when I was younger and junior, but it just comes with time and it comes with experience. So don't rush it. It just will start to come naturally.
mm. And I guess with regards to with had a brain freeze. um, with regards to sort of the in-house market in general, where do you see the sort of legal sphere, I guess, integrating with AI again, going in the next sort of 5, 10 years? Do you see it replacing lawyers? Do you see it being a sort of I guess, sounding board more, or do you see maybe even the sort of solicitors regulation body to sort of step in? Because what I'm finding is that a lot of sort of founders are starting to use AI to sort of draft contracts for themselves, but obviously that comes with a lot of risk, right? Where do you sort of see that going forward?
So I, I'm like I said, I'm a relatively new adopter of AI, but I think we're way off from AI completely replacing lawyers. I
Mm,
think in the same way that email changed the pace of things, I think it will increase the pace of work for lawyers and increase the amount we can do
mm,
because the time intensive, detailed tasks can now be done exponentially quicker.
mm,
So you can do more, you have more capacity. At least in the short term, that's how I see it working. The big DD reviews doesn't need a bank of lawyers anymore. It's a smaller team of lawyers who review what the AI does at a quicker pace, so it can then work on two, three, four reviews at the same time.
mm,
Contract negotiations, one lawyer can take on more multiple contracts than it currently can by using AI with, drafting or analysis and review. So for me, that's where we are at the moment. Now, I'm sure some people in the AI world will say, no, it's going to replace lawyers, but I just don't see that it's there yet.
mm.
Maybe in the future, but I don't see it's there yet. There will always be a market for an AI only lawyer, right? There will always be someone who, a founder maybe kind of operating on a shoestring budget who thinks, right, I'm going to take the risk. But it does come with risk. It doesn't come with the judgment
Of
that a
course.
human lawyer can still give.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important lesson. It's definitely not there yet. But I do personally feel that should be some regulation that's coming from the government because people are relying on what AI is. I guess if you ask it to write a vendor contract, now a lawyer would be able to tell you, oh, it's missing this clause, it's missing, force majeure, for example, it's missing a valid jurisdiction clause, something a lawyer could look at in seconds and be able to tell you, it's got unlimited liability, etc. But if someone isn't legally trained, they might not be able to spot those issues, and then they're going to sort of market with those contracts. So there's always that risk at the moment, anyway.
You don't know what you don't know risk kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, that's where it sort of lacks because I've tested it out a little bit and seen what it sort of I guess spits out. And what I found is, especially for some of the contracts it drafts, it drafts really simple contracts that doesn't really think about certain aspects that can happen that, a really sort of experienced lawyer would pick up pretty much very quickly. It's missing this, it's missing that, and I feel it's still far away from there, but I am aware of many companies that are working on this technology on a sort of day-to-day basis to improve it. So I'm hoping it's not going to replace lawyers, because then me and you will both be out of roles. But
But we have to adapt as well, right? We have to adapt. So I'm learning how to prompt AI better. So you don't, it doesn't just spit out the first contract, you take that and go. You then kind of have a conversation with it, and it starts
mm,
to build what you want more likely. But you're right, you still need to know what it's missing to be able to have that conversation with it.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess on sort of your sort of favorite sort of legal stacks, sort of technology stacks, what would you sort of recommend to any sort of head of legal, general counsel out there who's maybe thinking about adding a sort of technology into their sort of stack, something like DocuSign, etc., that really sort of is a game changer for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've never had that much budget to use stuff, to be honest, in my
Okay.
previous roles, except for DocuSign. That is definitely a game changer.
Mm,
Um, we've been looking at different providers. I've seen demos from various different places. The one I really liked was Wordsmith AI
mm,
for contract reviews. I thought that was very smart, very usable.
mm,
But we haven't, we're not at a place where we're actually purchasing anything yet. Honestly, at the moment, ChatGPT is free. You make sure you don't put anything confidential in it,
mm.
and use it as that kind of brainstorming tool. It goes a long way as a free resource, to be honest.
No, absolutely. I mean, I pay for the subscription personally, because I think it was last year where it was getting clogged up because so many people were using it. So I ended up paying for
Right.
it, and I just keep paying for it because it's I think it's for me on a day-to-day basis. If a client doesn't have a job spec, I can put a job spec together by prompting it really quickly, opposed to me sitting there physically and doing it. And then I can check it for everything that it needs. Simple stuff like that, you can really save, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. So yeah, 100% agree with sort of, ChatGPT being a sort of, I guess, I was thinking about it the other day. What did I do before having, access to such a tool? And
Hmm.
the amount of time that I lost just writing stuff manually, and yeah, it's been a bit of a game changer for us as well. Um, just on sort of closing questions, I wanted to sort of quick fire sort of questions to sort of leave the sort of podcast. Um, what's one word that your team would use to describe your leadership style?
Um, Hopefully supportive.
First job you ever had that was not legal?
I worked on a farm, shoveling hay bales.
Mine
It
was
was not as fun and nice as it sounds.
yeah, mine was Sainsbury's bakery. So I
Right.
ended up working in the back of the bakery, and I was sort of secluded from being able to see what was happening outside. So I was locked away in the bakery, and hated it.
I'd get very bad if I did that. I wouldn't be able to hold back from nicking some of the
Yeah,
pastries.
exactly. Um, I guess one book that sort of changed the way you think if you read. Um,
I do. I have to say, I don't use very many like businessy self-help books. I have to say. However, one that I did read that has been useful in the last couple of years, and I've referenced this concept earlier, is the culture map. It's about how different cultures communicate, and it was just really helpful in thinking about how I communicate with colleagues from different countries and cultures.
Most underrated skill for an in-house lawyer.
Communication. Maybe it's not underrated, but it's a must-have. Need to be able to communicate succinctly and different audiences appropriately.
Pet peeve when it comes to contracts.
Liability clauses.
Mine's when mine is when they send the contract in a PDF format, and then
Right, yeah, 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 I can see that. Or saying things like the computer says no arguments there. This is a policy. This is a policy point.
mm. um best advice you ever received.
The bit I said earlier, kind of putting your hand up for things that are difficult.
Mm.
Just get
And
yourself out there.
for your local coffee shop, what's your specific order?
A flat white with oat milk.
Nice.
I've actually been we've got like a machine at home. I've been trying to do latte art like the baristas do, and I keep showing my wife, but she's really not interested in my poor latte art.
Yeah, I've stopped drinking caffeinated coffee, so I'm now on the decaf because I just found it like, especially when you work at a desk all day, you end up drinking a lot more coffee than you actually realize. I was just
Yeah,
always on edge
yeah,
and anxious. I've cut it out, and it's been about a week now. But one thing I would say is I had a headache for about 2 days, and it just shows you how much
yeah,
like addiction that I guess I had to coffee. So, but the decaf is working for now. But I find myself sort of, I guess 5 p.m. comes around, I feel really tired. So,
yeah. Well, I've only actually been drinking it for over a year now.
mm,
Our second daughter coming along and the lack of sleep involved, I thought I need something. So I'm relatively new, but now yeah, I'm definitely relying on it.
yeah. Um, I guess if you weren't a lawyer, what would you be doing with your life at the moment?
I mean, I have silly ideas to go and do something different all the time, to be honest.
Mm.
My latest one was to buy a gym franchise, but yeah, then my wife kind of talks me out of it and be a bit more
Yeah.
sensible.
Yeah, no, no. It's always a good idea. Something that would surprise people about yourself.
Let me think. I speak Spanish is maybe
Okay.
one of them.
Fluently.
I wouldn't say fluent, but I can get by. I spent a year working in Spain, but I know if all my mates, all my friends, or even my wife see this, they'll laugh because I never shut up about it, apparently. So maybe people wouldn't be surprised about it.
Do you practice that? If I don't know if you guys have a Spanish team or you have team members in Spain. Do you?
We don't at the moment. My last place we expanded into Mexico while I was there, so and that was helpful. I used it kind of to build relationships, just like at the start of calls and stuff, have a quick chat Spanish with our lawyers over there or our team members over there, and it was I really enjoyed it because it allowed me to practice. They
Mm.
probably felt like they were speaking to someone who didn't really have the ability to speak, but it definitely created a bit of a point difference and was able to kind of build relationships off the back of it.
Okay, brilliant. That's all my questions. It was really good to have you sit down with you on the podcast, and I'm sure a lot of people will find a lot of great points within the podcast. So I want to thank you for your time, James.
Thank you, John Paolo. It's been nice to speak to you.